Thank you, Jerome. Good morning. You know, sometimes life presents us with problems or challenges that just seem too big to overcome. It seems like we can't do anything about it. And sometimes we work at them and we work at them, but nothing changes. The lesson today is about if you're doing something and it isn't working, quit doing it, discover something that does work, and begin to practice it. No matter what the situation is that you face, you can always do something to make it better. Now, there's been a lot of sickness going on so far this year. There's colds, there's flus, there's aches, there's pains, there's that blankety-blank crud that some people call it. You can fill in the blanks. And my cousin Ozzy came down with something. I was talking to him, and he said, I have aches and pains all over my body. He says, when I touch my head, there's a sharp pain. When I touch my shoulder, there's a sharp pain. When I touch my side, there's a sharp ache and a pain. And it just won't go away. So I said, what have you been doing for it? He says, all the natural stuff. I've been eating chicken noodle soup. I've been drinking a lot of liquids, getting a lot of rest, doing all the home remedies, but nothing seems to work. So I said, Ozzy, why don't we try something that you haven't tried before? I go to the doctor. So he went to the doctor, and the doctor diagnosed him as having a broken finger. It might take a little bit for that to seep in. Get it? Now, I had a similar situation this year. I came down with what everybody else has come down with, and it was kind of the cold and the sore throat and all of this different stuff. And I did the home remedies, and things got better, but I had this lingering headache that wouldn't go away. And no matter what I did, it continued. And I discovered that although I was feeling much, much better, I was still very, very tired. The spring had been taken out of my step. The joy seemed to diminish in my life. And so I went to the doctor, something that I hadn't done, got a shot, got some pills, and everything got better. Now, I tell you this because before I went to the doctor, and this went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, when I wasn't feeling good, when I was tired, and when I had this headache, and I became accustomed to it, that became the normal. My thinking was that's just the way life is. And oftentimes when we're facing problems and challenges that we can't solve with the old way of doing things, we think, well, that's just the way it's going to be, and it becomes our normal. The unlikable becomes our normal, and we kind of trudge through life. We have less happiness, we have less joy, but we just accept that as that's the way it is. Sometimes our problems are so big that they're just absolutely overwhelming. They overpower us. We think there's nothing I can do about this. I don't have the capacity to do anything, so I'm just going to have to live with it. When what you've been doing all along isn't working, change and discover something that does work, because no matter what the situation, you can always do something to make things better. In the Bible, we read a story about the Philistines and the Israelites, and they're at war. The Philistines have invaded the land. They're trying to take over the Israelites. And they're kind of at a standstill because the Israelites are perched on top of a huge mountain ledge, and there's a long valley, and the Philistines are perched on top of another mountain ledge. For either team to attack would mean going down the mountain, crossing the valley, climbing up the other mountain, which would make them very easy prey for the enemy. So after days and days of doing this, finally the Philistines got a little bit tired and annoyed with the situation. So they suggested that each side send a warrior out onto the field, let those two men battle it out, and whichever one wins, that team or that side will win the war. So the Philistines sent out their warrior. His name was Goliath. You've all heard of him. They say he stood 6'9". He had on a huge bronze helmet. His armor covered his entire body, and it was such that a spear or an arrow couldn't pierce it. He was a very intimidating sight. He had a huge shield that protected him from the enemy. So King Saul, head of the Israelites, turns to his army and says, one of you is going to have to go out and take him on in battle. Who's it going to be? Nobody answered. He says, I need somebody to go out and fight Goliath. None of the soldiers volunteered. Well, there was a young shepherd boy there that had come to the troops to bring his brother food. And he raised his hand and said, I will. Everybody laughed. You're just a lad. You're a small little guy. You can't go out and fight Goliath. And they tried to talk him out of it, but David said, I can do this. And finally, King Saul said, okay. So they brought out armor that they were going to dress him in, and they gave him a huge shield and a sword. And David says, no, I don't want any of that. They said, but you got to have weapons. You got to have some sort of protection. David says, I don't want any of that. And he went down the mountain and started to walk across the valley. Now, Goliath was standing there waiting for him. And Goliath assumed that they were going to do battle like they'd always done battle. And that is toe-to-toe, fighting with swords and spears until one perished. But David stopped when he was quite a distance away. And Goliath thought he was scared to come towards him. David didn't have any weapons, but he did have 5 stones that he put in his shoulder bag, and he had a sling. Now, as a shepherd, David was what was called at that time a slinger. And because if some sort of a foreign animal started to come towards the herd, he could ward it off by using his slingshot. So David put a stone in his sling, he whirled it around his head faster and faster and faster, and he let it go. It hit Goliath in the head. Goliath was knocked out. David ran forward, took Goliath's sword, chopped his head off. He did something that had never been done before because he knew the ordinary way of fighting wasn't going to work for him. Once again, when we try and try and try to do something and it's not working, we need to look at something that we haven't tried, because we always have the power, we always have the potential to make things better. There's always a way. So what is that way? When you're facing a problem or a challenge and you can't think of any way to get around it or to solve the problem, what is the way that you use if you don't know about it? And the most effective way, the most promising way, is the spiritual way. The spiritual way holds truth principles that can solve any problem, that can help us overcome any challenge, that can lift us up and move us forward to living a better life. Now, back in the 1800s, there was a movement called modern thought. And modern thought attempted to move religious forward beyond a lot of the myths and a lot of the superstitions into a new way of thinking. It was an evolved thought. The fundamentalists, many of the mainline Christian churches, saw this as a threat, so the fundamentalists actually began their own movement. Fundamentalism didn't begin until the late 1800s. Taking the Bible literally wasn't thought of until the late 1800s. So you have the fundamentalists that started infiltrating the churches, and they became seeped with dogma, with doctrine, with dictates, with obligations, with all sorts of different things. And Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, our founders, realized that the church was moving away from the teachings of Jesus Christ and getting more steeped in the dogma of tradition and ritual. So they began a movement called Unity. People from every religion, people with no religion, came to them to study. And the idea was to train these people in modern thought or in new thought or in spiritual thought and send them out to the churches to pick up the teachings of Jesus where the churches had strayed away from. They called this practical Christianity. Now that's very, very different than Christianity. Practical Christianity is all-inclusive. You don't have to be Christian to practice what Jesus taught. Practical Christianity is for everybody. Just as you don't have to be Hindu to practice yoga, you don't have to be Buddhist to practice meditation, you don't have to be Christian to practice Christianity, which is the teachings of Jesus. So, the troops went out, the different churches. Naturally, the churches said, not for us, go away. We don't endorse you, we don't condone you, we don't want anything to do with your modern thought. So, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore were kind of stumped. What do we do now? And the people that they had trained said, well, let us form our own groups. So they began forming little groups of truth students, they were called. And these people would meet all over. Eventually it spread all across the country. They were called Unity Centers at that time, which eventually became the Unity Church movement. But practical Christianity, once again, it condenses its focus down to what did Jesus teach? And it has nothing to do about religion, nothing to do about politics, nothing to do about lifestyle, nothing to do about anything, but finding principles that we can utilize in our lives to live a better life. One of the things Jesus said that has the most effect on me is, come to peace with your adversary quickly. Now, when he said quickly, he said that because when we focus on something, if we get disturbed or we get upset or we get angry at anything and we begin to focus on it, it's going to expand. Our thoughts expand the more we think about them. And thoughts turn into attitudes, and attitudes turn into dispositions, and dispositions turn into just our lifestyle, whatever it might be. So he said, come to peace with your adversary quickly. Made a lot of sense to me, but it's much easier said than done. You know, when I get upset with somebody or we're clashing heads, I am not in the mood to come to peace with that person quickly, and they might not be either. But who is the true adversary? If somebody is out there and I'm irritated by them, or I'm disturbed by them, or agitated by them, they're stomping across the landscape of my life and messing it up, are they the enemy? Are they the adversary? No, not necessarily. It's what I am thinking about them that causes the upsettedness inside. It's my thoughts and my feelings and my attitudes and my perceptions and that cause the distress. And it's not the world around me. I'm never going to be able to go out there and fix all the things that upset me. I've learned this after 50 years of driving. I'm never going to fix the traffic. But what I can do is change my mind, change my attitude in regards to it. So my advice to you is, if you're facing a problem or a challenge right now, if you're stuck in a situation that is very upsetting to you and it's distressing, if what you've always done isn't working, venture out and discover something that does work, because you always have the power to do something to make things better. And when things get better, you always have the power to make things better yet. That's in our DNA. We're wired for that. We have the ability, we have the creativity, we have the power to make changes in our life where we can evolve the happiness and the joy in our life to overcome any situation or circumstance. You always have the power to make something better. And sometimes it just means trying something new. So keep that in mind as we go into meditation. If you're faced with a problem or a challenge now, first of all, allow yourself to be at peace with it. That's the way your life is. It is what it is. It exists. And then say, I know that if I open myself up, the answer will come to me. Whatever I ask for, whatever I seek, I shall find. We'll now move into meditation. Take a deep breath. Slowly exhale. And just know that this is your time. It's your time to be still. It's your time to be calm. This is the time for you to reflect, to renew, to move forward. The greatest thing that each and every one of us desires is peace. Our most natural state is harmony. And the greatest experience we can have in this world is love. Peace, harmony, and love. Fill your heart with those three things. Fill your mind with those three things. And know that you have the power to move forward on your path and live the life you desire to live.
Slowly begin to bring yourself back. And we make peace with our adversary quickly. Seek peaceful mind, peaceful heart, peaceful spirit, and you shall find. And so it is.